Hello and welcome. This video will cover the AWS shared responsibility model. Security and compliance are a shared responsibility between AWS and customers. The AWS shared responsibility model basically indicates which parts of security will be handled by AWS and which parts customers are responsible for. We can say that AWS is responsible for the security of the cloud. That means AWS is responsible for everything related to the physical implementation. This includes physical facilities and systems. According to the model, customers are responsible for security in the cloud. That means customers are responsible for securing every application and data set that they implement in the cloud. AWS provides the tools to protect your applications and data. However, it is your responsibility to use these tools to secure your data and applications. AWS operates, manages, and controls the software virtualization layer and the hardware and global infrastructure components, which the physical security of the facilities where AWS services operates. AWS is responsible for protecting the infrastructure, including the hardware, software, networking, and facilities that run the AWS cloud services. Meanwhile, the customer is responsible for the encryption of data at rest and the encryption of data in transit from one system to another. The customer should also ensure that the network is configured for security. The customer should ensure that security credentials and logins are managed safely. The customer should also manage the firewall configurations and the security of the operating system and applications that run on any compute instances they launch. For example, using the Amazon EC2 service. Let's look at the security of the cloud now in more detail. Remember, this is the part that AWS is responsible for. AWS is responsible for protecting the physical security of the data centers and for protecting the global infrastructure that runs all services that are offered by the AWS cloud. The global infrastructure includes AWS regions, availability zones, and edge locations. AWS is also responsible for the physical infrastructure that hosts your resources, including redundancy and intrusion detection. AWS provides this infrastructure so that you can take advantage of the compute, storage, database, networking, and other services that are available. AWS ensures that the virtualization infrastructure provides isolation between customer workloads. For example, the EC2 instances of one customer are isolated from the compute environments of another customer. Now, let's look at the security in the cloud in more detail. Remember, this is the part that the customer is responsible for. As a customer, you are responsible for what you deploy when using AWS services. The specific security step you must take depend on the services that you use and the complexity of your applications. For example, if you make use of the EC2 service, you are responsible for securing the operating system that runs on your EC2 instances. You are also responsible for securing your applications and for configuring your security groups and network settings appropriately. You are also responsible for managing the security of your AWS data. When you use AWS services, you maintain complete control over your data. Given consideration to what data you choose to store in the AWS cloud, which services will need to make use of the data, and the geographic locations where the data will be stored. As a customer, you can encrypt your data as it moves and also when it's at rest. With regards to cloud computing offerings, you may have heard people talk about infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, and software as a service. These are popular terms for categorizing services. Infrastructure as a service refers to services when you maintain control and management of most of the system. Amazon EC2 is an example of a service that could be categorized as infrastructure as a service because you are provided with a virtualized server and you have complete control over managing that virtual server, very similarly to how you will manage it if it were a physical server in your physical facility and data center. On your EC2 instances, you manage the operating system and you decide what software to install. With infrastructure as a service, you retain a very high degree of control, and as a result, you have more responsibility for the security of the resources you create and manage. Platform as a service refers to services that make use of infrastructure, but where that infrastructure is largely hidden from your view and is instead managed by the cloud provider. Platform as a service removes the need for you to manage the infrastructure, and you can instead focus on your code and on implementing your applications. AWS services such as Amazon Relational Database Service can be categorized as platform as a service because AWS operates and updates the servers, the operating system, and automates the backups. You don't need to worry about resource procurement, capacity planning, software maintenance, or patching. You only need to access the endpoints to store and retrieve data. Software as a service refers to services that provide a complete, out-of-the-box software solution. The software is centrally hosted, and you, the customer, do not need to manage any of the infrastructure that supports the service. Some AWS services, such as AWS Trusted Advisor and AWS Shield, could be categorized as software as a service offerings. The licensing model for software as a service offerings is typically subscription or pay-as-you-go. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next video.